Hey there, it's Marlene Hielema from ImageMavenVideo.com, and in this video blog post I'm going to be talking about camera selection for YouTube videos. Now basically you've got maybe like 4 choices. The first is a Handycam, the second is your iPhone or iPad, the third is a dSLR, and the fourth is a mirrorless camera. Let's go through each of these and give you the pros and cons. Alright, so let's start with the Handycam. Now the Handycam at one point in time was the staple of everyone's home movies. Now the Handycams are great because many of them have this flip around screen. Okay, that's what I really do like about it. And I actually started shooting my YouTube videos about, let's see, in 2010. I started by using this camera. At the time, I paid like close to $1,000 for this. I think it's a piece of junk. Now the reason I do, for several reasons, it's very hard to use. It works great in automatic mode, but if you do anything like what I'm doing here, shooting against a white background, it has problems. It's really hard to set exposure compensation. Exposure compensation is something that you need to be able to set on your camera in order to do things like shooting against a white background or even a green screen. You also need to be able to easily set a custom white balance. And again, this is a little tricky, not impossible, but in general, just the image quality kind of sucks. Another thing is the file types that this camera captures. It captures what's known as AVCHD, which is a compressed video format. So if you're editing in things like ScreenFlow or Camtasia, it's a little trickier to deal with the files. If you're using video editing software, that's not a problem. I use Final Cut Pro. I don't have a problem editing these files or ingesting them into the computer. But it's really tricky to find the files if you're using other types of software. What else don't I like about it? Well, that's about it. I mean, it's basically not a good quality camera. It has a very small sensor and it's smaller than like a point and shoot camera, so the image quality isn't the greatest. Not that sensor size is everything, but sensors have really improved a lot as well in the last few years, so if you do get a Handycam, make sure it's a fairly new one and make sure that you can adjust white balance and exposure compensation easily. And make sure you can return it, because I do some tests first. Most Handycams have an audio input jack, and that's also something that you do need to look for in any camera that you buy. Okay, let's move on to the next. Okay, so here I have my iPad, and iPhone, iPad, you know, similar characteristics. You need to use an app to deal with exposure compensation, because if you point the camera at something that is really bright or really dark, you may not get the exposure you're expecting. Another thing is white balance, again, is also tricky to set. Now, if this is all you can afford, you will definitely need some accessories as well. You will need something for your audio input, so you'll need a microphone. And you will need something to hold it, because if you're working alone, you have a flip around screen, but if you're working alone, you have to be able to set this somewhere so that it won't shake around, because there's nothing worse than shaky cam. No one will watch your videos for too long if your camera is too shaky. So again, if it's all you have, you might need to get an extra external lens and a microphone. You'll also need an app that will let you use exposure compensation and custom white balance. Next on the list is a dSLR. This is a Canon 5D Mark II. I bought this so that I could shoot video. It was a huge step up from that little Handycam Canon Vixia I showed you. Now, at the time, this was the best I could get. But to be honest, it has lost its luster for me. They're very expensive, and yes, you can do everything custom. The only thing, it doesn't have a flip around screen. Now some DSLRs do, but this particular one doesn't. I can do custom white balance, I can choose different file formats and everything, no problem using different software. But the drawback really for me is that the autofocus sucks. Yep, I said that. The camera I'm using now, it actually will follow focus. So if I hold this camera a little bit closer, you will hopefully see that it is in focus. And hopefully I will be back in focus. So the camera I'm using, which is actually a mirrorless camera, and I'll go over the details of that in a second, is able to focus automatically. With this camera, you have to focus manually, and if you're working alone, you have to put something in the shot, focus on it, go back and forth to the camera several times before you actually can start shooting. So at the time, I thought it was a good idea, and it is, I must say, one of those regrettable purchases. I don't use this anymore for my photography or my video. All right, so let's go on to option 3. Now, by the way, this great image quality, very expensive though. Okay, if you want to hit this up, very expensive. Since this came out, other things have happened in the world of photography and photo video making, and that has to do with mirrorless cameras. Now, the last type of camera I want to talk about is the mirrorless camera. Now, the great thing about a mirrorless camera is that it's a lot less money, and you can get kits that cost, with camera and lens, a lot less than your average entry-level DSLR, and the quality is awesome. The great thing about mirrorless cameras is the autofocus. And in my video blog post right now, I basically use one mirrorless camera, and it's the Lumix Panasonic GH3, and I use a 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8 lens. Another camera that, if you can't afford a GH3, because it is a bit pricey, is the FZ200 or the Lumix G6. And the G6, if you're starting out, is what I highly recommend you use. It's a mirrorless camera. It has all the features that you need, especially an external audio jack, which some mirrorless cameras do not have, especially the older ones. But you want to have an audio input jack so that you can plug in an external microphone like the one I'm wearing here. That will help when you're shooting your own YouTube videos. Make sure the camera has a flip around screen. With mirrorless cameras, it's easy to set up white balance and exposure compensation, manual exposure, and you get to choose the file type as well. Yes, it shoots AVCHD if you like that format, but you can also get them to shoot MP4 files and MOV files depending on the type of camera. So that's a bonus if you're using software like ScreenFlow or Camtasia to edit your videos. There's one I didn't talk about, and that is a GoPro camera or a toy camera or things like that. The drawback with those kind of cameras is that there aren't any settings available. You basically set them up and shoot. You can't adjust anything. So everything is automatic. Now, for average outdoor shooting, it's perfect. But for indoor shooting with things like white backgrounds or green screens, it's going to throw off things quite a bit. Not bad for a second camera or a backup, but not good for your main camera. As well, there's no audio input in those. All right, sorry to be so long-winded. Basically, you've got your choices, your Handycam, your iPad or iPhone, your DSLR, and your mirrorless camera. I highly recommend going the mirrorless route. There's many brands out there that shoot video. I recommend Lumix, and I use the GH3. If you're starting out, go for the Lumix G6 with the kit lens, 14 to 42 millimeters. You're going to be set for quite a long time. Get yourself a microphone as well, and we'll be talking about that in other blog posts. Thanks for watching. It's Marlene Hielema from ImageMavenVideo.com. Hey, do me a favor. Share this video, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss another one of my blog posts. Take care.